Greetings, friends. You are on the Military Reports channel. And today we will discuss with you the situation in Ukraine on the 23rd of August, 2025 year. A lot of things have happened today, so let's get started. And in general, if we analyze the activity and intensity of hostilities on the part of both the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian side, we can unequivocally say that we have not seen such high-intensity fighting for quite a long time. Today, the Russian army has the impression that it has completely moved to a certain new stage of offensives. A kind of general offensive has begun, accompanied not only by advances in certain sectors of the front, but also by countless FABs that arrive at the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. What is the reason for this? It is difficult to say. It is possible that the upcoming negotiations on a peaceful settlement of the conflict affect the intensity of hostilities on the part of the Russian Federation. Perhaps the intensity of the fighting that we can observe now is affected by the fact that today Ukraine celebrates the National Flag Day, and tomorrow Independence Day will be celebrated. Perhaps because yesterday, on the day of the state flag of the Russian Federation, the Ukrainian side struck at the Druzhba pipeline. Today, the Russian side, let's say, strikes back along the entire line of contact. Well, let's take a look, study the situation, discuss it at every important site. And we will start with you from the Zaporozhye direction. And today, based on the information that, perhaps for the first time in the last week, we have not received any news regarding, perhaps, the further advance of the Russian army towards the settlement of Gulyaipol, or towards the road R85 or Pokrovskaya, we can conclude that, apparently, the Zaporozhye offensive in this area was temporarily suspended. It is possible that now the Russian army is regrouping in order to stabilize the front line in the western Donetsk direction, in the area of such settlements as Alexandrograd, Andriivka Klevtsova, Zeleny Hide Tolstoy. Let me remind you that over the past few days, and this is already apparently reliable, the Ukrainian side has carried out a series of counterstrikes carried out by brigades such as the 141st Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. This is the 5th Heavy Mechanized 37th Marine Infantry. And during the contour strikes in the Ukrainian side, it was possible to restore control on Andriivka Klevtsova. The green guy is partially over the settlement of Tolstoy. Today, no progress is being made on the site. Apparently, either the Ukrainian side has stopped. Now they are regrouping before a possible further breakthrough in the direction of a peaceful Mosquito, as well as similar Russian reserves may have arrived in time, which are currently trying to stabilize the situation and restore control over the lost settlements. Then we are moving with you towards the Pokrovskaya agglomeration. This is where the most important and interesting news comes from. Looking ahead a little, I would like to say that the assault began today. The assault is not Pokrovsk, the assault is not some kind of Radinsky, where fighting has been going on for quite a long time. Today, the Russian army is maximally concentrated on the southeastern coverage of the Pokrov agglomeration. That is, it is the settlement of Mirnograd itself, as well as a network of strong points located between Novoekonomichny, Nikolaevka, Mirnograd, Cossack Promenade and Balagan, that is, in this zone. And it is here that Russian units are breaking through now, according to some pro-Russian military experts, over the past day. The Russian army has managed to make significant progress in this area. Also, based on this configuration of the map, it can be concluded that in certain areas, in certain strongholds, individual units of the armed forces of Ukraine were surrounded, possibly in mini-boilers. Let's see how the map has changed over the past day. This is how the map looked like yesterday. Today, we see with you that the Russian army has made significant progress. While this information is provided only by pro-Russian experts and cartographers, we are waiting for additional information. Waiting for geolocation, confirmation from other lips is possible, and then the map will acquire a different color. But in general, if this information is confirmed, then the progress is quite significant. Moreover, the Russian army, as we can see from these adjustments, has decided to advance towards the Pokrovskaya agglomeration of the safest area. This is the most remote area from the Ukrainian positions, primarily artillery positions. This is the southeastern, most remote part of the entire Pokrov agglomeration. There is a high probability that the Russian army will seek to enter the territory of Mirnograd in order to consolidate. And of course, most importantly, in order to get some kind of roof over their heads, where they can further concentrate accumulate for further advances, both to the west, northwest and north. Also today, a large number of objective control personnel are being received, as the Russian army and the Russian aerospace forces are carrying out massive air bomb attacks on the territory of the settlement. We have not had such a number of strikes with FABs, and such a number of promotions, adjustments on maps in the Mirnograd area. We have almost never received since the beginning of hostilities for this area. Unambiguously, the concentration of icons and their quantity only indicate that something is happening directly towards the world of reward. But in general, this is also not surprising, because today is already the 23rd of August. On the 23rd of August, the end of summer, autumn is already, let's say, not far off. And we see with you unequivocally, based on the experience of a special military operation, we see with you that in this area, if we talk about cold, let's say, periods of the year, there are much more habitable positions under the Ukrainian side for overwintering than on the part of the Russian Federation. Perhaps what we can observe with you now is, let's say, a little preparation for the heating season, let's say. Entering the territory of cities such as Mirnograd and Pokrovsk is a vital necessity for the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian side understands this perfectly well. Therefore, the Ukrainian side faces not so much a task here as to hold the settlements of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. Apparently, this is unlikely to succeed. Now the task is to hold out until the cold weather, to prevent the advance of Russian units through the territory of the city, in order to actually deprive even those positions where it would be possible to sit out, overwinter the next winter. If we talk about the settlement of Pokrovsk itself, then here pro-Russian, neutral pro-Ukrainian cartographers have made a complete repaint in the central southwestern part. Let me remind you that during the period of July, and also until the beginning of August, we repeatedly discussed with you the activity of sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the central part of Pokrovsky, near the railway station, in the southwestern, in the southern part, in the citadel area. Today, all of these adjustments, which were provided by various cartographers, have been removed from the maps of most cartographic services. The Russian army has completely left central Pokrovsk, southern Pokrovsk. Most of the territories that were previously considered as disputed, we have painted back in favor of the armed forces of Ukraine. The territories in the area of Leontovich, Trojans, we still keep in the gray zone. We are waiting for more, say, geolocations and evidence that the Russian army really left central Pokrovsk. This is the story unfolding on this site, of the adjustments that have been confirmed by geolocations. There is a very interesting video from the northeastern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. Ukrainian sources publish this video, where we can observe with you a series of drone strikes on the positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, on attack aircraft, which are gradually getting closer to the side of Mirnograd. Some geolocations and some impacts were geolocated, including one of the impacts was recorded at this point in the railway area. On the basis of these objective control frames, sewage treatment plants were painted in favor of the Russian army. In other words, we see with you that, yes, the world of awards, most likely, will be the #1 goal for the Russian Federation. And not only for the purpose of promoting and fulfilling the task of cleaning up the world of awards completely, but also as an integral part of preparing for the winter offensive, and for winter assault actions, when naturally, there should be some kind of roof over your head. Basements, some buildings where Russian units could accumulate and overwinter, let's say, survive the winter. If we talk about the breakthrough zone, then a heavy, let's say, counter-battle continues here. The Russian army continues its offensive. Again, a large number of objective control frames are published. How strikes are carried out on the positions and forward positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, in Belitsky, Mirnograd, in Pokrovsk. For now, I will repeat once again what I said at the beginning of this video. There is a very high intensity of aviation work. The blows are simply applied to every square kilometer. No adjustments were noted on the map, but the footage of objective control from the territory of the settlement of Mayak and Pankovka was published. Let me remind you that the other day the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported on the cleaning of this settlement, but without any objective control personnel. This report was provided by the Ministry of Defense a few days ago, but today there are shots of objective control, where we see the movement of attack aircraft of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, the cleaning of buildings and structures. Well, in the last frames of this video, you can also observe two Russian soldiers who raised the Russian tricolor on the territory of Pankovka. That's it, we don't paint anything based on those frames, but in general, there are confirmations that we have been waiting for so long. Then we are moving with you towards the settlement of Konstantinovka. This is another locality that has been subjected to a massive strike with the use of aviation. By the way, if we summarize in general, then over the past day, a dozen strikes on the Pokrov agglomeration have been recorded. The same number of strikes in the area of Konstantinovka. And if we talk about the settlement of Kramatorsk, then it is reported at all that during the night and in the locality, it was recorded in the area of 40 arrivals. 40 aerial bombs were launched by the Russian side on the locality 4 to 3 hours on the night between the 22nd and 23rd of August 2025 year. In fact, we are seeing record figures with you now. It certainly means something. This means only one thing, and the Russian side is moving to an intensive phase of assault measures. Tomorrow is the Independence Day of Ukraine. Of course, the Russian side is trying to achieve the best possible results. Well, we're going back to Konstantinovka. From this site, as we have just said, footage is being published of how strikes are being carried out. These shots were published today by a large number of pro-Russian sources. Most of the impacts were geolocated and recorded. In general, we see that arrivals are taking place in Konstantinovka. There are arrivals both in the central part of the settlement and in the southeastern part of the settlement, in the part where, according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to enter the other day and possibly gain a foothold. But if we talk about the most important news in general, then the most important news from the Konstantinovsky site comes from its southern part, namely from the territory of the settlement of Kalabanbul. This is the last settlement that was located in the area of the Kalabanbik pocket, the Kalabanbik section of the front. And today, this locality, according to the summary of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, was cleared by units of the South Group of troops. At the end of the 23rd of August, no video material has been published yet that could confirm this information. But in general, the map has already been painted by us, as you can see. Moreover, some pro-Russian sources are painting the map even more up to the Klebenbiksky Reservoir itself. But so far we are not in a hurry to paint it like that. There are still forests here, most likely, where Ukrainian units are still present in anticipation of evacuation to the northern shore. But speaking in general about geolocation, there is one video in the Klebanbek area published by the Russian side, where we can observe how with you as Russian units, Russian stormtroopers are engaged in cleaning out strong points in the Kotorinovka area of Klebanbul. Yes, this geolocation here is applied outside the correction zone, but in general, this geolocation confirms that this network of strong points has come under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's see how the map was adjusted. And here I remind you that there is a fairly high dynamics. Let me remind you that yesterday the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported on the cleaning of Vladimirovka, Rusinov, Yar, and the settlement of Kotorinovka, but today, in fact, the same direction is being painted in the Klebanbik area. That's it. In fact, there are only 3 villages left in front of the settlement of Konstantinovka. This is not Lipovka, Pleshayevka, Ivanopol. But, apparently, the Ukrainian side has been resisting for a long time in this area, physically simply unable to. A little to the north, Russian units came close to the settlement of Mayskaya. The Ukrainian side has published footage confirming the control of this network of strongholds by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. We will not watch the video due to the presence of a large amount of violence. And of course, we are moving on to Kramatorsk. I will repeat myself again. It is reported that during the night, only during the first 72 minutes, 30 explosions were recorded as a result of air bombs and missiles. A little later, it was reported that an additional 10 explosions thundered in the vicinity. And a little later, more precisely, on the afternoon of the 23rd of August, this video was also published. In these frames, we can observe with you the area of concentration of units of the 156th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. This is, apparently, fresh reinforcements that arrived at the site, in order to stabilize the front line, as well as strengthen certain areas. But during the reconnaissance activities, this concentration of units of the 156th Brigade was recorded, detected, and immediately the Russian army began to inflict massive strikes on these positions. According to the personnel of Bibista Control, also simple calculations recorded the destruction of at least 3 tanks, 4 multiple launch rocket systems, several infantry fighting vehicles, several armored combat vehicles, several electronic warfare stations, and several warehouses. If we talk about the personnel, so far no figure has been provided. But in general, we can sum up that a fairly powerful reinforcement was put out of action from the 156th Brigade, whose goal was to stabilize the situation. In other words, I repeat, we see with you a very high intensity of hostilities. And of course, the Konstantinovka direction smoothly flows into the Serebryansky, Seversky section of the front, Limansky section of the front. A large number of geolocations, a large number of icons with flags that indicate some kind of advancement of the Russian army, are also coming from this site. And of course, the most important adjustments today come from the territory of the Serebryansky forestry. Today, cartographers from the pro-Ukrainian deep state team report that the front and, in general, the Serebryansky forest and the defense of the Serebryansky forestry have completely collapsed. The highest dynamics of the offensive is noted here, which, apparently, is primarily connected not even with the retreat of Ukrainian units, perhaps even with flight. This is the picture we could observe with you on the 21st of August. Let's just say that half of the Serebryansky forestry was either in the gray zone or under the control of the APU. But starting from the 22nd of August, very large repaints begin. This is the first repaint. We drew attention to it yesterday, dividing the territories into 2 parts, with which the Russian army began to work, let's say, in parallel. And today, on the 23rd of August, information is received that one of the pockets has already been completely cleaned. Pro-Russian sources today publish a large number of video materials, analytical materials, according to which dozens of Ukrainian soldiers surrender from the territory of the Serebryansky forestry. Then 10, then 20, then 10, then 5, then 6 soldiers surrender, and apparently they may even have got lost in this forest, unable to leave it, so gradually, they are captured by the Russian army, which has already actually reached the Zherabets River and Seversky Donetsk from the north. In the near future, according to both pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian analysts, the Russian army will already force the Seversky Donetsk River in order to exit towards the settlement of Dronovka. We also do not exclude the advance towards the settlement of Yampoli, the beginning of hostilities already because of the estuary. If we talk about the Limansky section directly, then today the most important news comes, let's say, from the northwestern coverage. Today, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported on the cleansing of the west of the village of Sred, located between Shandrigolova and Karpovka, by a group of troops. This is how the map looked yesterday, by the end of the 22nd of August. Today, the map gets an additional touch. The Russian army is actively advancing here and is gradually approaching the settlement of Lyman, which actually protects the heart of the Donbass operation, Slavyansk-Kramatorsk from the north and northeast. In the near future, we do not exclude the beginning of active hostilities for the estuary, for Seversk, for Konstantinovka. Hostilities are already underway. The Russian army is already storming the world of awards. The only place where we see with you a small, let's say, lag behind the schedule, or lag behind the general plan, is the Zaporozhye direction due to the fact that the Ukrainian side has launched an unexpected contour, a strike in the area of the western Donetsk region. And that's it, dear friends. The Military Reports channel reminds you that we condemn any violence in the world, and call on all parties to start immediate negotiations and resolve all problems diplomatically. Thank you for watching, subscribe to the channel, put your likes, and all the best to you.